Hello everyone, glad to be back. Today is 17th of March, now it's almost 12 o'clock, middle of the day by Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my channel in which I share latest updates on the news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. There is quite a few very significant developments and news that I like to share with you for this moment. But before I start, let me say that if you think this channel is interesting, useful, has some potential and deserves to exist in this field of news and political commentary, please consider to support with small donations through PayPal or subscribe to my Patreon channel. You will see links under this video in the description box. And when it comes to Patreon, I will ask Patreon subscribers to give me some questions because as I promised, tomorrow I will make some videos in Moscow and simultaneously I will try to answer to all the questions. So that's been said, let's talk about news now. So when it comes to news, I will start today with international affairs. And first news is that according to press service of Kremlin, from 20 to 22nd March, Chinese leader Xi Jinping will visit Moscow. He will have a meeting with Russian President Putin. They will discuss issues of international affairs. They will discuss situation in bilateral relationships. They will sign some documents also, and in my understanding, we will probably not see statements from Xi Jinping and Putin about cooperation in fields of military deliveries from China to Russia. But as I understand, after this meeting, it will only take like day or two, maybe week, and probably we will see statements from high-ranking officials of China and Russia that China is beginning to supply Russia with all the necessary military equipment. First of all, of course, we will probably see Chinese strike drones, but same time we may see Chinese multi-launch rocket systems, Chinese field artillery, and ammunition, shells and missiles. But same time, I did spoke about this topic many times before. China needs to examine its military equipment in the battlefield, and that's why we may see Chinese heavy military equipment, for example, Chinese armored personnel carriers or Chinese tanks also on the battlefield. This way China will gain some experience and then use that experience to improve the equipment. So probably we will also see Chinese we will not see it, but probably China will also send its military personnel to gain some combat experience, which is crucial for Chinese military. But that will be open secret. Media will probably not talk about this topic, at least openly. So yes, quite a huge development. Western media will definitely try to downgrade the significance of visit of Chinese leader to Moscow, but in reality this is maybe one of the internationally significant development of the year, not just the current time, but for the year, because Xi Jinping and Putin will probably decide when conflict will end in Ukraine and on which terms. Let's continue now. And we have statement from Chinese ambassador who said that China was always next to Russia and China will stay next to Russia, and China and Russia will conduct themselves back to back when it comes to international affairs. So we are seeing some statements of support to Russia from Chinese side, and as you probably notice, if a month or two ago Chinese diplomacy was quite careful, they were trying to play safe and show themselves as a neutral party. Lately, last 2-3 weeks, and now we are seeing that China is openly and directly supporting Russia, which is quite a change, and that's gonna be, in my understanding, preparation of ground for even more cooperation between the sides, especially when it comes to military terms. Let's continue, and now I will talk about Ukraine itself, Ukraine and special military operation. We have RT's article here that Western elites are warning Zelensky and his associates to not to blow last-ditch effort to conduct some successful counteroffensive operations. According to this article, Western masters of Zelensky are not really happy with the fact that Ukrainian armed forces using quite a lot of military personnel and ammunition and military equipment in direction of Bakhmut, and losing personnel, ammunition, and equipment when that stuff could be used in some other places to conduct some counteroffensive operations. I can see logic in this. Context. Western elites probably have enough reasons to not be happy with Zelensky and his henchmen, but same time, it is also obvious that time was lost by Zelensky and his Western masters to withdraw forces from Bakhmut with and minimize effect of that defeat. Because, as I said many times before, once Russian side will establish full control over the Bakhmut and the Chisov Yar, and it's only a matter of next days. Once this happens, of course, it will be humiliating defeat for not just for Zelensky's regime, but also for his Western masters. That's why they are trying to distance themselves from decisions that Zelensky is making. For example, this article, which is based on a New York Times article, also shows you yet another attempt from Washington to distance itself from Zelensky's regime, so that when Bakhmut will become under Russian control, Washington will have opportunity to say that they did warn Zelensky's regime, but Zelensky did not listen, and that's why they end up losing territories. So yet again, kind of plausible deniability. Western elites will definitely try to minimize damage, but I don't think they will be much successful when it comes to battlefield. Situation in Bakhmut, as I said, it's just everyday deal now. Situation in Bakhmut becoming even more difficult for Bakhmut garnison, because as you know, I did report about it, that the Russian side established control over the Khramova, or at least this settlement is contested now, which means that Bakhmut garnison cannot use roads that are from northern side of this gap between Bakhmut and Chisov Yar. And same time, we had reports that Russian forces establishing control over the Ivanovskaya, which is here, this little settlement, and H32 highway. That means that H32 highway is not just under artillery fire, but also under direct control of the Russian forces. There are still few country roads between Bakhmut and Chisov Yar that theoretically can be used by Ukrainian side to send some military equipment or reinforcement, but yet again those roads are destroyed because of weather conditions. It's almost impossible to use those roads, and it's too risky, simply too risky, because of Russian artillery fire. And you can see on Telegram channels, for example, many new videos are being shared on different channels with the more and more destroyed Ukrainian columns on that road. Usually it's columns that are trying to flee Bakhmut, but time to time we can see little columns that are trying to bring to Bakhmut some reinforcement and ammunition, and they are also destroyed. So situation is quite dramatic for Bakhmut and Chisovyar garnison. Now we can say probably that we are talking about both these garnisons simultaneously, because after recent offensive operations of PMC Wagner in northern part of Bakhmut, and after forward movement of PMC Wagner from southern side, we can say that all the roads from Chisovyar towards western side is also under Russian artillery control, and theoretically, at least, Chisovyar is on the operational encirclement, because there is no safe road to go in or out of Chisovyar for this moment. This pro-Ukrainian map will not acknowledge these developments for long, but at least for a few days. But situation is truly devastating. When it comes to rest of the front line, southern side is usually artillery duels between the side. Donetsk direction is quite active, and we did had reports that Russian side conducted successful offensive operations in direction of Marinka in previous 24 hours, and surprisingly, even this pro-Ukrainian map is acknowledging that lately Russian units did manage to establish new positions in this settlement, even though it's still contested between the sides. When it comes to Avdiivka, if you remember, like maybe a week or two ago, I did start talking about Avdiivka situation in Avdiivka more precisely, and I was saying that this settlement will end up in operational encirclement, and now we are definitely seeing exactly this. After Russian side took control over the Krasnogorovka here, about which I did report 2-3 days ago, it's become obvious that Avdiivka in operational encirclement, and all the roads from Avdiivka are under Russian direct or indirect artillery fire control. So we may see in Avdiivka some kind of situation like in Bakhmut, when garnison is trapped, garnison is not receiving order to retreat, and it's exactly the time now. If it's not too late, then if Zelensky's regime cares about soldiers, they should give garnison of Avdiivka order to retreat right now, before it's not too late, because it's only a matter of 3 to 5 days, probably, maybe a little more, and Avdiivka will become basically encircled. And his story of Bakhmut will repeat itself in Avdiivka on a much lesser scale. Of course, we cannot compare Avdiivka with Bakhmut, but still it's gonna be quite devastating development for Zelensky's regime. We also had information that Russian side was quite active in this line of Oskol River all the way to Kupiansk, and forward units of Russian forces are now controlling parts of Kupiansk, which is here on this gray zone. So it was also predictable, because once Bakhmut Chisovyar story will resolve, it's just logical and too obvious that next will be Seversk and Avdiivka. And that way Russian side will secure its flanks to conduct offensive operations in direction of this last defense line that Ukraine Zelensky's regime has on the east, which is the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk defense line. So if you want to learn more about situation on the front line, you can check military summary channel, defense politic Asia channel, DPA war channel, and of course Alexander Mirkor is also in details are explaining situation in the front lines. So, and many others of course. But my channel is not just about Ukrainian conflict, so I will continue now. And next news is about drones. This story is still quite relevant for media, for Western media especially. So yes, there is some developments in this topic, and I will also touch this matter in a minute. So when it comes to drone situation, we have some updates that Pentagon did send yet another drone in the direction of area that a few days ago MQ-9, a surveillance drone, went down. And I did share on my Telegram channel information about it, but it seems like, as you can see here, it seems like that US drone is circulating over the Romanian territory and not crossing the coastline. So maybe Pentagon did learn something from previous incident or accident, which is quite interesting stuff on its own. So, and we have statements from US officials that they regard Russian demands about air above the Black Sea or northern part of Black Sea as illegal measure, because they think US has all the rights to send its drone over the international waters. But let's be realistic. Russia in military conflict with Zelensky's regime. US is a part of this conflict. For now, US is playing like indirect involvement. US playing on plausible deniability. But everyone knows US surveillance drones are sharing information with Zelensky's regime, and Russia has all the rights to shut down sky for US drones over the northern parts of Black Sea. That's how any one country will act. If US was in conflict with Mexico, for example, and Russia was supporting Mexico, and if Russia will send drones over the Gulf of Mexico, I'm quite sure US will, without a doubt, shut down all those drones. Isn't it? So it's not different. Maybe US officials think that they have some more rights than anyone else, but they are not, basically. So they are not exceptional. They may think that they are, something special, but they are not really. So let's continue now. As I understand, US government, current government of US White House, is using any opportunity to divert attention of US citizens from internal problems. And if a few weeks ago it was Chinese balloon, now it's a drone that went down over the Black Sea, and probably US media will talk about this topic for weeks now, if not more. And same time, of course, everyone knows that it's banking crisis is underway in USA, not just in the USA, in Europe also, but it has started from USA, and everyone knows about high inflation in US, and there are quite a few problems that needs to be resolved. But White House does what it does best, trying to divert attention of society from real issues that US citizens care about. So let's continue now. This is RIA Novosti's report. I did share this information on my Telegram channel, of course, and by the way, there is these updates on the YouTube, but same time, during the day I do share many more news on my Telegram channel. That's kind of addition to my YouTube channel, and you can subscribe and check this channel if you want to learn about situation developments in the field of news and politics on the Telegram. So let's continue. We have statements from Poland about decision that was made to send first 4 MiG-29 jets to Ukraine. This is quite a big development. Because same time today we had statement from Prime Minister of Slovakia, according to which Slovakia will also send its MiG-29s to the Ukraine. Slovakia has 11 MiG-29s. 10 of them can be, after some maintenance, can be used as fighter bombers, and I don't know how many of them will be sent to Ukraine, but decision from Slovakia is already made, and this is quite a big development because, as you remember, a few weeks ago, Russian representatives in UN stated that Russia will receive such action as an open, direct involvement in conflict, in this conflict in Ukraine, and what kind of response Russia will, what kind of steps Russia will take in response. It's who knows. But if Moscow will say that you are now directly involved, I would not be surprised if Moscow will strike airfields that these MiG-29s will take off. So it's quite serious development. And same time, I have some doubts that these jets will operate from Ukraine. These jets may operate also from Poland or Slovakia, and in that case, those fields that these jets will be based on definitely will become legitimate target for Russian side. So situation is escalating quite rapidly, and in coming days we may see some major escalation. Once these planes will cross the border and end up in the skies of Ukraine, then we have on our hands some major escalation. Let's continue now, and this is TASS news agency's report about statements that Trump made. So according to Trump, conflict in Ukraine should be stopped as soon as possible because it posed danger to escalate so much so that we may end up in a global war, which is world war basically. And Trump is probably right because, as I said in previous few days, Seymour Hersh, this award-winning journalist, did share information with all of us, with the world public, that current White House administration is preparing plans for open involvement of USA in this conflict in Ukraine. And the Seymour Hersh is a very well informed journalist, and he has its sources in all the major institutions of USA, from secret services to Pentagon. So I have no reason to not trust his statements. And if that's the case, if Biden administration is truly preparing ground for U.S. Open involvement of U.S. in this conflict in Ukraine, then that means that we are a step away from direct confrontation between Russia and the U.S., Russia and NATO. And Trump is absolutely correct. This conflict should be stopped as soon as possible. And as I said many times before, it will take from Washington only one call to Zelensky, and this conflict is done. Yes, I understand that peace negotiations will take place under Russian conditions, but no one forced USA to provoke this conflict in the first place, isn't it? So now Zelensky's regime, this puppet regime of US and the United Kingdom, will have to deal with consequences together with Washington and London and the rest of the Western states. So it's serious. It's very serious stuff. Let's continue now, and this is RBK News agency's report about statements that Netanyahu made, Prime Minister of Israel. So according to him, Israel cannot support Zelensky's regime on a large scale because Israel has some deals with Russia, some communication with Russia, and if, as I understand, if Israel will support Zelensky's regime in a serious scale, then Syria may strike against Israel. So, or maybe Russian air defense systems will start shooting down Israeli planes that are constantly attacking Syria. But anyhow, even though Netanyahu did not speak about details of negotiations that Israel has had with Russia, he mentioned Syria, which means that if Israel will support Zelensky's regime, then Russia will create some problems for Israel in Syria and from Syria. And when it comes to Syria, you should understand, same time we can talk about Hezbollah, this political and military group in Lebanon, which is basically a major force, one of the major forces in the region. So if Israel will escalate, Russia can answer with even more escalation. And Israel is not gonna be happy with the consequences. So let's continue now. And this is important because, as you know, Zelensky constantly asking Israel's government for more military support. But, Zelensky is a stupid idiot. I mean, he's an uneducated clown. He probably cannot even tell you what countries are bordering Israel, for example. So, of course, he don't understand that Israel's situation is quite complicated, and it's not easy for Israel to make some crazy moves, like, for example, Polish elites are making, or Slovakian elites. Israel is a very different state. So let's continue with the news. So we have statement from Russian ambassador in the USA, And according to this statement, US media is doing its best to somehow divert society's attention from investigation of Seymour Hersh that was published quite some time ago about Nord Stream pipelines. And this is also true, of course. Of course, this is also true. Major media outlets of the USA, as I understand, don't even say anything about this investigation. Exception can be only Fox News, because I do know that Tucker Carlson in his show did spoke about this matter. But that's the exception, basically. Rest of the US media doing its best to somehow divert society's attention from all the major issues and all the real issues, and investigation of Hersh is one of them. Although it's quite understandable that majority of US society don't really cares about Nord Stream pipeline. They are, or Ukraine for that matter. And if you ask like top 10 issues that ordinary US citizens truly care, you will probably not see mentioning of Ukraine or Nord Stream pipelines or Europe whatsoever. And it's quite understandable. People want to live their lives peacefully, and people want problems to be solved. But Washington is busy with some, some crazy international moves, on the international area, and So yes, Russian embassy is correct. Of course, US media is trying to divert attention of US society from major issues and real issues. At the same time, we should understand that not that many people in US truly cares about Nord Stream pipelines. They probably are care about act of international terrorism that US government committed. That's completely different story, because it will have consequences, and these consequences eventually will influence quality of life of the ordinary citizens of US, because entire world is now step by step trying to distance themselves from US, because everyone is afraid. There is no red lines anymore, and US, it's obvious that US can strike anyone and anything anywhere, because they don't care. At least current administration of White House. So there will be consequences. Biden did damage US reputation like no one else before, man. It's just unbelievable. Let's continue now. This is TASS News Agency's report, and this is very significant about statements that was made by Riyadh and Iran. And they, as you know, just on previous week, China managed to achieve some great diplomatic success with bringing together Saudi Arabia and Iran. And we have continuation of this story, and now Riyadh and Tehran are openly saying that they will take some steps towards de-escalation, and they have now agreement not to fight against each other. And when I'm talking about de-escalation, we should remember Yemen in this case. I believe Saudi Arabia will take steps to de-escalate, for example, in Yemen also, and Iran will make sure that Hussites that are fighting coalition of Saudi Arabia will also de-escalate, and they will probably stop striking Saudi Arabia's territory. So it's a big deal. And same time, Saudi Arabia is promising to Iran that it will not allow third parties to use territory of Saudi Arabia to strike Iran. So as we can see, China was truly successful in this strategic direction for China, for example, and not just for China, for the world. And if these two countries will find the common ground, it's just great news for everybody, for the entire world. So quite important developments in the Middle East. Let's continue now. This is quite interesting. That's what I was talking about. And this is Commerçant newspaper is reporting that U.S. banks received some $165 billion in a single week. $165 billion were transferred to U.S. banks, which is colossal, truly, which is colossal. I mean, I do understand that U.S. is the biggest economy in the world, but when it comes to numbers do matter, and how long Washington will be able to print these dollars, as many as they want, and throw away like it's nothing, I don't know. So $165 billion have been given to U.S. banks in last week to make sure that they will somehow manage and maintain stability and at least not collapse entirely. It's a huge, and this I don't think this will be enough. I don't think this will be enough, man. So, but still, man, what you gonna do? So this is about some economical development in Russia, and we have information that some study was conducted about business climate in Russia, and I will give you some numbers. In 85 regions of Russian Federation, it took place, this study, and more than 1.5 thousand businesses and owners of businesses were asked questions, and according to them, major problems, major issues that they see is formalism from officials and corruption. So incompetence, formalism, that we can say incompetence of some officials and corruption, and it's hard to disagree with this study, because everything I know, for example, also telling me that corruption and incompetence is a major issue for Russia in all the fields. In all the fields, not just in small businesses or middle businesses, just everywhere. Incompetence and corruption, because when you have corruption, horizontal corruption, it does create incompetence, because people with no knowledge, no experience are using money and connection to take on positions that they did not deserve, that they are not ready. And as a result, we are seeing a situation when there is plenty of officials everywhere that have no competency to conduct their job properly. And this is serious stuff, man. I hope one day we will see in Russia a real fight against at least horizontal corruption. I do understand that to combat vertical corruption, it's almost impossible. You can see vertical corruption just in any country in the world. US, for example, it's just madness what is going on in the US. It's even legal in US to bribe politicians, and they call it lobbyism. I mean, come on, man. I do understand that vertical corruption is difficult to deal with for 100%, to exterminate it for 100%, but you can deal with horizontal corruption, isn't it? So I hope there will be some steps in this direction in Russia, because that's a true issue, real issue. Because I was always saying corruption and incompetence is a major threat for Russian state and Russian society. And I'm 100% right. So let's continue. Now we have a report from RIA Novosti. And according to this information, Russian auto manufacturer was having negotiations with Iran to export Russian Lada cars. Probably you are familiar with Lada. So there are some negotiations taking place so that AvtoVAZ will be able to export Ladas in Iran, and same time negotiations are conducted by Iranian side also. And as I shared with you information like a week or two ago, two Iranian car manufacturers are on right now are conducting last formalities to start exporting Iranian cars to Russia. So quite interesting in a sense that this north-south trade route, little by little, step by step, but it will start work and it will start to become a crucial trade route for Russia to communicate with the rest of the world, and for the rest of the world to communicate with Russia. And it will be beneficial for Russia and Iran, of course. So it's a big deal. And now I will just go through some headlines on RT, and this is it. Just a few headlines. So in Poland, inflation is highest since mid-90s. Inflation is a big deal for all the European states, as I understand, but Poland is probably suffering maybe a little more than its neighbors. This is quite interesting news. Cuba accepts Russian payment system, MIR. As you know, Russia has its own payment system. It calls MIR. That's the name of that system. And if Cuba accepted these MIR cards, that means, and ATMs in Havana allow cash withdrawals in pesos using MIR cards, which means that we may see some big increase in tourism between the sides, as I understand, and many Russian citizens will probably travel to Cuba. And now it's too expensive, I do understand, but if travel becomes more and more easier, then probably ticket prices on the planes will also come down, and Cuba may receive millions of Russian tourists every year. It's quite possible, because Cuba is wonderful. It's a wonderful place, wonderful people, wonderful culture. Everything is wonderful about Cuba. So let's continue with headlines. Credit Suisse. I did spoke about this bank yesterday in an update. So Credit Suisse has had received lifeline from Swiss government. As you know, Credit Suisse asked for $53 billion, and yes, that's also quite huge. And Iran's oil exports reach 5-year high. That's Iranian officials are saying, which is also good for Iran. Also good for Iran. And this is it. This is it for now. This is it for now. If you find this video interesting, please hit that like button. Leave some commentary about any topic you like, and Please share links to my videos or my channel with your friends on Telegram, Twitter, Facebook, or any other platform that you are active on. That will greatly increase my chances to reach wider audience, and I will be very grateful for this, of course. And yes, if you can and if you want to, you can support my channel with small donations through PayPal or by subscribing to my Patreon page. You will see links under this video in the description box. This is it for now. I hope this update was interesting. Have a nice day and take care.